being sons and daughters of God. Sons and daughters obviously suggests that there is a relationship between us and God, and that relationship goes way beyond some superficial acquaintanceship, way beyond some idea of friendship, but goes to the core of our being, that we are sons and daughters of God. In other words, the distance between God and humanity is bridged such that we become adopted sons and daughters of God. Of course, God is divine in nature and we are human in nature, and our sonship or daughterhood of God is not determined by nature. It's not determined by nature. The only one who could claim to be Son of God by nature was Jesus Christ. The rest of us, being human in nature, can acquire the adoption. We are adopted by God. We are not by nature gods, but we are embraced by God, with those natures being separate, divine and human. So the question is, how do we acquire this blessing, this adoption, this gift? Because we see our relationship with God, if it is to be determined by the word adoption, as a gift. And the answer comes in today's epistle reading from the second letter to the Corinthians. And it is interesting that this passage is appointed today because we are just about to go into the Triodion period. Next week we begin the Triodion. The Triodion is the preparation period leading to Easter. And that includes 3 weeks of mental preparation before we go into the fasting period of the 40 days. And when Easter is late, like it is this year, May the 2nd, with the 8 or 10 weeks that lead up to the Easter festival shifting over a little bit, it leaves 2 or 3 weeks, which is about now, where the cycle of readings from the previous year runs out. And so we have 2 or 3 readings in these couple of weeks that still relate to the Triodion and speak about catharsis and inner cleansing and becoming and working towards holiness, which is the theme of the Triodion. So we get a bit of a prelude in these couple of weeks. And this is a very, very strong passage in that regard. This passage is also read at the Ευχέλαιον, the unction service, the service of healing with holy oil, which we do for people who are ill or sick. It is one of the 7 readings of the Ευχέλαιον. So let's look at how we can acquire the relationship of sons and daughters to God. What does it take? Apostle Paul says that we should strive to become a temple of the living God. A temple of the living God. The Greek is naos Theou zondos. In other words, not just to stay where we are, not to just continue our normal human behavior, but to strive for something better. And this is very clearly understood, or more clearly understood, by those who might be of Jewish background, because this wording relates to a lot of the Old Testament ideas. Each and every one of us should strive to become a temple of the living God. Now, we often hear in popular culture this phrase, but it becomes devoid of God. The popular culture says, I like to make my body a temple, as in full stop. Whereas the original, and this is pure, very Christian, the original is that we should strive to make our bodies temples of the living God. That's the original. Not just temples. And it is testament to modern culture, which is so self-centered, that I want to make my body a temple. Whatever that means. I suppose what they do mean, generally speaking, people, is that they want to keep their body healthy. And that's a good thing on its own, from a bodily point of view. But the phrase here speaks about our inner spiritual state. You cannot possibly become a temple of the living God just bodily. That doesn't make sense. The reference here is to how we can spiritually change ourselves on the inside, such that God abides in us. Now, as Christians, we believe that God is everywhere and through all things, permeates all the universe and all of existence. But the Old Testament idea is that God lived in the temple of Solomon. God lived in the temple that he directed Moses to build first, and that was as a tent, in the form of a tent, when they were nomads, and when they eventually settled in Jerusalem and the surrounding lands, they built an actual temple, stone, a building. And the belief was that God dwelt in that temple. And so this passage carries from that and says, in the same way that, at least from the Jewish understanding, God abides in the temple, likewise, we should strive to make ourselves temples of the living God, so that God dwells in us. And that's already a departure from the Jewish idea, because God dwells in the temple. The Christian idea is God can dwell in each and every one of our hearts. It's a much bigger idea. And Apostle Paul quotes the Old Testament to demonstrate this presence of God in the temple, but the temple being our hearts. I will live in them and move among them, and I will be their God, and they shall be my people. That's an expression of God's presence amongst his people, his community. Now, the two words, temple and people, in Greek there is a rhyme. They rhyme. So the Greek word for temple is naos, and the Greek word for people is laos. Naos and laos. This is nice. And so what we have here is, if we are to become the people of God, the laos του Θεού, how is that achieved? Is it just dynastically? Is it just through inheritance? Is it just through being born into the community? That's the Jewish idea, that you are born into the chosen people. You are born Jewish. We can often think that way too. I am Christian because I'm born Christian. That's only part of it. And it shouldn't be the only part of the story. Being the people of God requires something from our part that comes from our freedom and our choice. So to become the people of God, the Laos του Θεού, we have to make each and every one of our hearts a temple of God, Naos του Θεού. You're not born into it. You make it happen. You open your heart for God to dwell in it, and you cleanse your inner being from those actions, behaviors, and so on. Passions, we like to say in Orthodox Christian philosophy or theology. Our passions. Cleanse ourselves from those passions so that we can become that temple. So what's the connection between cleansing and the temple, you might say? Well, both in the Jewish tradition and in the Greek Orthodox tradition, we like to keep our temples clean. We can't possibly have our temples, our churches, look like our homes, perhaps. No offence to anyone, I know I've just visited 700 homes, and I'm not referring to anyone's home here. The temple needs to be clean. Our heart needs to be clean. And this idea of cleansing and catharsis is so important as a first stepping stone and as a first stage of our spiritual journey. Apostle Paul makes it clear in this very passage. Since we have these promises, i.e. that we will become the people of God and that God will dwell among us and walk among us, the Greek is emberipatiso, He will walk among us, that's so present. Let us therefore cleanse ourselves from every defilement of body and spirit, and make holiness perfect in the fear of God. That's what we're striving for. Καθαρίσομεν εαυτούς από παντός μολυσμού, σαρκός και πνεύματος, επιτελούντες αγιοσύνην εν φόβο Θεού. Αγιοσύνη, holiness, goes together hand in hand with phobos Θεού, fear of God. Holiness is understood as standing apart, not being normal in a good way. Not being normal, we mean not doing what society normally does. What society normally does is to strive for what I want, for example. What society strives is make as much money as you can and do what you like with your money. That's very normal. But the Christian message says you can do all that, but also stand apart from what's normal. Be better than normal. Strive for better and lift beyond normal. Make holiness something we strive to achieve through fear of God. Fear of God should be understood as respect and reverence of God, and not, fear as in being scared of God. Fear of God has to do with the reverence of God. If you were to etymologically split up the word reverence, you will get the word fear in it. Revere. That bit of the word revere, V-E-R-E, is the old French for fear. They're related words, revere and to fear. It works in Greek as well. In ancient Greek, phobos is not just to be scared of someone, but it is also respect of or reverence of. And so, brothers and sisters, to conclude, that's the deal. If we want to be Laos του Θεού, the people of God, each and every one of us need to strive to become Naos του Θεού, temple of God. Amen.